good morning or afternoon or whatever it is. We're here today to kind of give you an update on the plans we've been thinking about for months about moving things back indoors, although I think it's kind of ironic we're talking about moving indoors when the last 2 weeks we've already been indoors anyway because of weather. But our plan is to go back to the schedule, pre-COVID schedule. I won't say the old schedule because there's so many versions of that. But that is, we'll have worship services at 8:30, 10:15, and 6 o'clock in the evening. And you can see a lot of the details about what that's going to be like on our Facebook page or website. But we can probably flesh in some of those details as we're talking. But the goal of all of this is, again, just the Acts 2:42, that we want to be devoted to the apostles' teaching, breaking bread, fellowship, and prayer, and do as much of that as we can in person. And we are really blessed in that, we've been in-person worship with outdoor options and adding more and more ministry as the last 5 or 6 months have gone. So it hasn't always felt really easy at the time, but as we were thinking about the plans going forward, we realized, we really have been blessed. There's been some really neat things that have happened this summer and this fall already, and so I thought I would just give each of you guys an opportunity to share some of the things that have been going well. We'll start with Ben, whose voice has been missing lately because his microphone wasn't working earlier, blah, blah, blah. Go ahead, Ben.
I don't know what you're talking about, Tim. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that with the changes that we've had to youth group, which, normally we're used to everybody being together on Wednesday nights, high schoolers and middle schoolers, that's just how things were. But, and it's good. I love when we're able to have that. But I think it's been really good to see the kind of connections, the more consistent connections within age groups on the various high school and middle school nights, and getting the student leaders involved at middle school nights and seeing them thrive. Yep. And seeing them connect with middle school students and having it just be like their night, I think has been really fun. And really, I think the students have been really enjoying having that opportunity to just be like, this is high school night, this is middle school night. And so I've really liked that. I think it's been going well. Small groups have been going, the discussion and connection that's happening in small groups. And, recently we had on Friday night last week, and then this Friday we're going to have the same event for high school, but last week we had the event for middle school, and it was so fun for just to have, it was their time, and for them to, just have fun and, explore the whole church, and nothing got destroyed. There were no injuries. So great job, guys.
Didn't lose any kids.
Yeah, didn't lose any kids.
Yep.
So that's a huge success for any youth event. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to doing that for high schoolers again on Friday night. And to have that special time. And yeah, I think the changes have been good, though. Initially it felt weird to be separate. Yep. But the changes have been good, and we're having consistently the same group of students come, 20 or 30 on each night, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Good, thanks. Neil, any updates? How things been going well?
Well, yeah, things are coming along. I think for our adult groups, some have faced challenges in figuring out what it looks like to get together. Yep. But within that, you always have new opportunities to try new medias and mediums for getting together, and that's been a good thing. I've really been encouraged by the intentionality that's taking place within our relationships as group members are seeking each other out. And maintaining that commitment to each other, which is not easy, I think, for any of our groups right now, seeing the spectrum of where different people are at with all that's taken place. So it's exciting to see some of our groups getting back together, and being able to meet in person has been a really good thing. So it's been good.
Good. Krishna, children's ministry.
All right. Well, children's ministry is always fun, virtual or not. We did have a lot of fun, even virtually. We had our Friday fun days through the summer, and And then we were able to come together in person for the first time for Summer Seek and Find. And I know that was such a blast with all the kids, and even staying kind of in family groups, it was just a blast. It's been fun to add in more and more in person. Alana came back to in person at the beginning of the fall, and it's very similar to the way it has been with minor changes, and everybody's just really enjoying it. I know I surely do. We brought nursery and preschool back in August, and that's been going very well. And now this Sunday, I'm super excited that we get to bring elementary back too. So we're getting there, and I know it's been a joy every step of the way, even with changes, even the virtual fun. We have more videos. I've had to learn a lot. I'm not a super tech savvy person, but I'm getting better. And we've started family fun pop-ups. So if you haven't seen anything about that, we've done 2 so far, and that's just people coming together just to have a good time as families and connect in an outdoor type activity. So you'll have to watch the Facebook group to find out what this week's fun pop-up will be, though.
So good. We are really grateful for the way that the Lord has allowed us to stay open and stay in person. There was a time there about a month and a half ago where we squeaked by with some isolation and quarantine people, staff, and others. But the Lord has allowed us to continue to be in person since the beginning of June. So we're grateful for that. And as we think about now, we don't have an outdoor option. Although I thought maybe if it's above 60, any day it's above 60, the rest of the winter, maybe
we should go with Neil's above 40 shorts cut off.
Sure. You can think about it. We'll think about that.
So if Neil's wearing shorts.
I hunt in colder.
Right. True. And Packer fans go to games in cold. But I digress. There are a couple of really important things.
I guess you got to put on a better show.
Yes. There are a couple of important needs that we have as we think about moving everything indoors coming up. And one of those is we're going to need more volunteers. So if each of you want to speak to that, big or small, if there are some needs you have in terms of volunteers to be able to do ministry, multiply ministry back in person, and speak to any needs you might have.
I can start. Yeah, because we had minimal in-person on Sunday mornings, we had very little need for extra volunteers. But now that we'll expand that and be covering all age groups, we definitely are seeking out those of you that would be willing to jump in and help either in nursery, preschool. There will be a kindergarten to 2nd grade group and a 3rd to 5th grade group. So we can definitely use some extra hands and helpers in any of those areas.
Okay. Anything new? Maybe just a couple connections?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one on a Sunday morning for the large group gathering is definitely connections. And it's a little different now with the numbers we're having in each of our services. But if you're willing to come and be a part of creating an atmosphere of hospitality and making sure people feel welcome when they come through the door, we could use you. And as always, group leaders, again, one of the things this gives us the opportunity to do is grow in our commitment to each other in smaller environments. But to do that, we need people who are willing to host those and facilitate those conversations and studies of the Word. So if you're interested in facilitating a group or hosting a group, we always could use more of those, not just during Corona, but really any time.
Yeah. Ben, anything?
Well, like I said before, the student leaders have been a great help. And with the split schedule on every other Wednesday, it's been less of a commitment, and so that's been nice for my adult leaders to, have that one Wednesday and then come back in 2 weeks. And so I feel really blessed with the consistency I've experienced from my leaders and the support. So again, thank you guys. So right now, I think very minimal. Sometimes on event nights, but I reach out to people. So yeah,
good. And I think from my perspective with worship services, we particularly would still have some need for people in the sound booth to run sound, video projector, that kind of thing. So if that's something that you're interested in, let me know or Leanne know. So there are needs as we go back in person. There's more needs for leaders and volunteers. The other need is just a theme we've been really emphasizing all through the summer and now in the fall, and that is just the commitment to be patient with each other and to be united. These are, I mean, I feel like we talk about it quite often. I talk about it in messages quite a bit, but it really is a serious value that we are committed to unity as we go through all of this COVID pandemic, and some of the protocols we need to follow, the hand washing, keeping distance, cleaning surfaces, which we're trying to do in between services, and keeping groups from being in too large in numbers. Face masks are an important factor, especially we're still asking that you wear face masks while indoors, and would just emphasize it's especially important to have face masks if you choose to sing, because to put it crassly, your spit flies farther when you're singing than when we're talking. So that's why especially that's become an issue, that we just need to wear a mask while we're singing. And we ask that you do it while indoors. And we also are doing our best to keep us socially distanced. The 6-foot guideline has become more and more significant as we see some of the active cases come up, and you hear how the health department is tracing. The 6-foot distance is a big deal. So, we can't social distance, but what we're trying to do with them is mitigate by just keeping them in smaller groups, the same groups of kids from week to week. Students are getting used to social distancing because they're doing it in school, and by the way, the school has stayed open. One of the few schools I know of anywhere that's been open since July, and largely because they just want to be open, so they're doing what they can to stay open, and that includes the social distancing. So in the sanctuary, we will continue to kind of limit the number of seats available, basically trying to keep it 25%, which means we'll have some overflow options if we get to that point. But it also means if you come late and there's not a chair available, we're trying to keep it at that level for that reason. But we believe that offering Sunday school and some of the adult options at the 10:15 will help us to have more people be here and still keep social distancing. So in all that, one of the verses that's come to mind, because I do know, I think this year with all the partisanship with the election, some of the protocols about COVID have become even more divisive than probably normally would have been. And so the verse that has come to my mind, and I know others have talked about this verse, is the verse from 1 Corinthians 8:9, where he's talking about whether or not you should eat food offered to idols, which is not an issue in our culture, but it was an issue then. And Paul says, "Be careful, however, that the exercise of your freedom does not become a stumbling block to the weak." A mature Christian knew that idols were not real, and so that if you had offered food to them, it wasn't that big of a deal because it wasn't real anyway. But there were some people who come out of that who felt very strongly, I can't do that. And so all his principle is don't use your freedom to cause somebody who has an issue with this to stumble. And so we would just encourage you to take that mentality. The protocols may or may not be important to you, but our goal is we want to keep meeting, and we don't want to make it hard for someone who may feel strongly about that to be united. And so just be gracious about that with one another. I think there is a tendency, we've talked about this in crisis, to become processing myself and become selfish. And we've talked about this at staff, we've talked about this at elder meetings, and how it subtly just crops up there. Even in sometimes, if I've figured this out, then I see you doing something different than I am doing, then I'm jumping to conclusions which are completely based on my own self. And so I would just encourage us not to jump to conclusions. So if you see people without masks, don't jump to the conclusion they don't care, which we could do, but that's kind of a self-perception. On the other hand, if you see people wearing masks, don't assume that they're afraid. It may not be, that may not be the issue. The issue is we want to be safe and open, and we don't want to allow Satan to use these issues to divide us, because when we start dividing over these kinds of issues, then nobody wins, and Satan actually wins. So with that in mind, we just encourage you to bear with one another and be united as we go forward. And we've talked about this. We jokingly have said we should have filmed some of our staff meetings and elders meetings over the time, but are there any other, I mean, Neil, you had a very good insight. Maybe I'll have you kind of wrap up with that insight as we think about this Sunday coming together for worship, and it's Communion Sunday. And what was, you just want to share?
Well, I shared a little yesterday from 1 Corinthians 11, which is the passage in which Paul is reminding the church in Corinth of what they are doing when they come together for communion. And it's a pretty familiar passage probably to a lot of us. It's one of the places we go to on communion weeks. But Paul is addressing an issue where as they gathered together, some were coming in ahead of the gatherings, it would seem, and helping themselves and eating and drinking to excess, so that when others gathered, there was nothing left for them. And he said that when you're doing that, it's not the Lord's Supper that you're taking. And that comes to the point where, after reminding them of sort of the service of communion, he closes with, that we must take communion, and now I'm doing it without the Bible in front of me, but we do so, and we have to be careful not to do so in an unworthy manner, and that we ought to be aware of the body when we come together for communion. And the body he's referring to there is the church. And I think it's easy for us to use that or take that as an example of how we can come into church more concerned about ourselves than we are about the body we have been called to gather with. And it's a perfect picture that when we pursue Jesus, when we come together to worship him and rest in him, we do so as a part of his body that he has called us together to at Bible EFC. And so we have a chance to take communion this Sunday morning and remind ourselves that we are united in Christ. We have been purchased and washed in his blood by his body being broken, and he has drawn us together so that we are brothers and sisters, and we are called to worship him, being mindful of one another. And that means that we want to serve each other, and we want to care for one another, and we want to be with one another when we get together.
Yeah. So thank you for your patience and for your prayer through this time. And again, just if you have questions, you have concerns, please talk to me or one of us, and we want to talk about it. But we want to do everything we can to keep being devoted to one another in person as the body of Christ. So thanks for tuning in. We'll look, Lord willing, see you Sunday.